Now, over the past several decades, the 14th Dalai Lama has emerged from the quiet tradition of Tibetan Buddhism to become one of the world's most outspoken advocates for positive change. And with the 79-year-old now withdrawing from his official duties, he's fully focused on being a force for good. And that's the title of Daniel Goleman's new book, in which the psychologist and best-selling author unpacks the Dalai Lama's vision for our world. And Daniel joins me now. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Alana. Good to see you.
So talk to us about the Dalai Lama. Crystallize this man's vision for us as you see it.
Well, the Dalai Lama is an extraordinary figure, of course, and he's made a shift in the last few years. Many people aren't aware, but this is not a Buddhist message. This is a message for everyone. What he's saying is that if you take a long view of how the world is doing, it's actually not as bad as it seems in the daily news feed. You know, the news feed tends to, not yours, of course, but those others.
As someone who works in the news, I know it tends to be a little depressing.
And I'm a journalist too, so you know, what's news is for the reptilian brain, what we should be afraid of, really. And he's saying, you know, that's a distorted view. Actually, things have been getting better and can get much better, and he gives a plan for that in this book. It's very surprising to me. He says, first of all, in line actually with what Ariana says in Thrive, work on yourself, become more mindful, think compassionately, work on cultivating compassion. Science is saying now that if you do that, you actually activate positive circuits in the brain for feeling good. He calls it being wise selfish. You think about other people and you think about helping them, it actually makes you happy first. And then he says, act from that point of view. Don't just have the attitude. What matters is what we do. And his compassion, I was surprised. It's a very muscular compassion. The first thing he says is, let's get rid of corruption and collusion in the public sphere, dirty business, dirty politics. You could add dirty sports, you know, these days, or dirty religion. The Pope is a great example of someone cleaning up his own house, really, now. And the Dalai Lama applauds that. So it's a forceful compassion. And he also says, you know, of course, help the needy, but help them help themselves, empower them. He loved the story I told him about a bakery in the Bronx that hires only homeless people who have families or ex-cons, people who couldn't get a job. And they bake brownies, and they send those brownies to Ben & Jerry's every day. And it goes in chocolate fudge brownie. You might have eaten some.
Yum.
And their motto is, we don't hire people to bake brownies. We bake brownies to hire people. Another point he makes is that business has an amazing ability to do good as well as make money. And he encourages companies to do that, to use their power, to use their organization, not just to, you know, have good yield quarter by quarter, but also to do like Unilever is doing. They're sourcing raw materials in 500,000 small farms in the third world that aren't part of the supply chain. The World Bank says this is the best way to help an impoverished area with its health, with its education, with its economy. And here's a company, Unilever, doing it, not waiting for government.
Not being forced to, yeah. Well,
not being forced to do it yourself.
It's interesting because, it really brings up the question of what moral responsibility is these days too, right? And where an individual sees themselves in the world, where a company sees their place in the world. And that's why I just want to go back to this issue of wise, selfish, and of compassion too. I think that so many people often think that these are incompatible. Right? And so why is it? Why does the Dalai Lama think that we struggle with this so much as humans?
It turns out that that's a cultural blind spot in our culture.
Yeah.
He said, you know, in my language, when you say be compassionate, it includes yourself. You have to take care of yourself first in order to be able to help other people. So from his point of view, compassion includes and starts with each one of us, but it doesn't stop there. It's not just having the feeling I should do good. It's going out and doing something. Maybe as simple as, you know, helping that lonely elderly lady down the street who doesn't go out of her house, bringing her a meal. Well, that's a beautiful act of compassion. Or it might be doing something like Unilever's doing in the third world. It can be a great scale, individual scale. His point is very empowering. Each one of us has something we can do to make the world a better place.
Another thing that I think is quite interesting about the Dalai Lama, which many may not realize, is, and you mentioned now he's really stepped away from being a religious figure and just trying to be a leader in many senses of that word, but he's also, over the years, focused a lot on science to make his arguments. Well, why is that?
This is very surprising. I first met him in the 80s, and at the time I was a science journalist for the New York Times, and he told me that he really wanted to meet with scientists. he's kind of a self-taught prodigy in science. Over the years, he's had intensive week-long meetings with scientists in quantum physics and cosmology, in psychology, and every field. And he uses that. And he now is not just being a Buddhist leader, he wants to reach out to everybody. So he doesn't base what he's saying in A Force for Good on Buddhism. He's saying this is science-based. Science says, and brain studies show it, that we can become more compassionate. We can cultivate the circuits for compassion, which interestingly are the same circuits as for a parent loving their child. It's that, we all know that kind of love. But he says, you can generalize that. You can expand the circle of people who you include in that. And the bigger the circle, the more compassionate you'll be.